Today, and I'm with the Arizona Manufacturing Extension Partnership. I'm happy to bring you the second webinar in a 5-part series. This one's called How Healthy is Your Supply Chain? It will be presented by Seema Pool. So let's get started. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Arizona MEP. The information on our website and phone number are below. Our mission is to make every Arizona manufacturer the most successful business it can be. Here's our team led by Dave Garofano. And the advisors on the screen are pretty much listed in order of when they started with the MEP. But combined, we have about 100 years of experience within the industry. We all come from industry with different expertise. And again, our bios are on our website if you want to look at each of us. This slide is letting you know the structure of the organization. So it's a national network, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, is the overseer of the program through the U.S. Department of Commerce. Every state is able to apply for a grant to run the program in their state. Within Arizona, the authority in Arizona is Arizona Commerce Authority, and we are housed under them as the Arizona Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We report up to NIST directly, as do all the other states. This slide is showing you that each state has their own program. Either they're part of the Department of Commerce like us, or they are under a university like in Indiana, they're under Purdue, or they might be privately held like California. Their program is called CMTC. So every year, well, quarterly, the NIST sends out surveys to the clients that have been using the program and records the impacts that the clients have seen through our services. And in 2019, close to 115,000 jobs were created or retained. We had 15.7 billion in new and retained sales. We are able to help companies save $1.5 billion in cost savings. And they had a combined total of 4.5 billion new client investments. And again, this is nationwide. The results, the top challenges for clients are cost reduction, employee recruitment, growth, and product development. And overall, the program received 85% out of 100 as to how likely they would be to recommend the program to other manufacturers or friends or whoever they think could benefit. Within the state of Arizona, we typically rank in the 90s for satisfaction. So we're very proud of that, and we're very proud that the work that we're doing is being well received. What is the work that we do? Well, we kind of like break the business up into two sides, operational and business. And so we pretty much help with anything and everything the client is asking for help with. So the big ones on this side of the business would be continuous improvement and how we help you improve your lean manufacturing and get more done with less and improve that process so you can see an increase to your revenue. I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is just an idea of the topics. And then as we talk with you and you want to learn more, we can help you with like your certifications or how to optimize your inventory. Maybe you need help with your MRP system. And we also have a program where we can help you save a lot of money on your shipping. So if any of these topics seem like something you need help with, we hope that you would contact us. On the business side, we are helping companies understand the R&D tax credits for both their federal and state income tax returns, and helping them to see that a lot of what they're doing, they can get money back for, or write off against their taxes. And so it's been very helpful to open their eyes to some savings, again, that they can take advantage of. Another one is your utility bill. There's a proclamation for state of Arizona, all the manufacturers are exempt from state and county tax. Well, the problem is they don't know that. So we'll go in and help them determine if they've been paying taxes that they shouldn't, and then help them receive that refund as well as a credit on their bill moving forward. Well, I'm sorry, they get a 4-year, they can go back 4 years for a refund, and moving forward, the tax is removed. So they save money moving forward on their bill as well. So I ran through that pretty quick, but overall, I want you guys to just be aware that we can help with pretty much anything that's going on within your business. And the best way to contact us would be to go to our website. Again, I mentioned this is the 2nd out of 5 webinars that we're hosting. All of the webinars that we are hosting are on this website as well. We have an events page. And so just to keep you informed, I would say go to the page and make it a favorite, and then just follow us and let us know if there's anything we can help you with. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce well, I guess I'll leave it on my, sorry, I'll wait to share your screen. Or can you go ahead and share your screen now, Seema? Okay, I'm gonna introduce Seema. She's a visionary and results-oriented transformation leader with more than 20 years of management, consulting, and industry experience in high-tech manufacturing, consumer goods, and aerospace defense, delivering complex strategy solutions. She's a recognized industry thought leader that works closely with all levels of the organization to drive significant transformation and cost improvement results. She is the principal and managing partner at 4 Optics. 4 Optics is a boutique management consulting company that specializes in supply chain management, design, and transformation. 4 Optics consultants are practitioners with deep industry knowledge. Seema herself is a practitioner and has been delivering results that have positive impact at customers' bottom line and also on how they do their business. She's involved in the AZ Policy Academy as an advisor, helping shape the policies of AZ companies and bringing more business to AZ. She's a third-party advisor for the Arizona MEP and our subject matter expert in supply chain. And I'm happy to hand it over to you, Seema.
Thank you very much, Tanya. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Unfortunately, through Zoom, I can't see you, but you can see me. So we'll make the best of it. Typically, with these types of presentations, I like to have open dialogue and have you ask questions and engage. So, but with the webinar, with the Zoom, it's a little bit difficult. So what I will do is go through my slides for about, I would say 30 minutes, and then open it up to questions. Please ask lots of questions because I think that's the best way to get the most out of these types of webinars. So again, let's get started. Today's topic is how healthy is your supply chain? So supply chains, are living organisms. I know we don't necessarily think about them that way, but they truly are. Supply chains are all about understanding what's working and what isn't working. And from a health perspective, we're going to talk about the different aspects of supply chain and how to actually thoroughly look at your supply chain. So, those of us who have a few years under our belt, remember that supply chains used to be linear. It was pretty simple. You had a supplier, you had a bunch of suppliers, and you would make things and you would deliver things and so on. And so, from the onset, it was, considered probably not even a complex matter. It was considered something sort of someone did in the back room. And the fact of the matter is, over time, the supply chains have evolved. They're no longer linear concepts. They're rather complex, evolving driven, value-driven networks. And they can actually be very, very critical to the profitability of a company. So we have sources of suppliers, we have vertical integration, we have outsourcing suppliers, we have our customers who can also be competitors in some realms, and then they're partners in other realms, and so on. So the sheer nature of supply chain has changed a lot, and therefore understanding the health of it is even more important. So it's analogous to, as we get older, we want to do more and more preventative care so that we can get ahead of any issues that might come at us. And supply chains are essentially the same concept here. So as if, supply chains being complex wasn't enough, we also have other elements at play. So supply chains are impacted by geopolitical situations. They're impacted by suppliers that are perhaps going in and out of business, are changing their business and shifting their focus. You've got economic conditions that are impacting supply chain. You've got pandemic, of course, that we're all dealing with here now. And then we've got impacted customers. So because of all of these pressures, you've got customers that are requiring different things that they might have in the past, are requiring shorter lead times, more customization, and sort of this instant delivery performance. And then the boardroom is got a lot of cost pressures, right? So I don't know any CFO out there that says, hey, spend as much as you want. Every CFO is thinking about costs, the bottom line, and the costs that the supply chain has to deal with to deliver that bottom line. So as you can see, that very complex and evolving network has almost like this, I would say, this tier effect of pressures as well that make it very difficult for a supply chain to have a clear understanding of where the soft spots might be. Okay, so fear not. There are ways to look at it, but before we go into that, let's take a look at how typically, or I would say more of a reactive approach that tends to be out there. And I would say, I've been part of those organizations where we've taken these approaches. And what I would say is that the typical approach addresses fragments and symptoms. So for example, we might have customers complaining about our delivery performance. So what do? Customer on-time delivery is low, so we build inventory. Okay. Again, I'm making this very simplistic. Certainly, there are many companies that are doing a lot more strategic thinking around this, but I just want to give these as examples as what a reactive approach looks like. You might have competition is more responsive. So what do? We look at competitors and say, well, they're adopting certain technology platforms, so let's do the same. You have low yields internally. So we find external partners and we expect them to have higher yields with the same designs, okay? Symptoms of supplier delays. So we launch expediting resources to improve delivery at those suppliers. So specifically, we're addressing very specific symptoms and they seem like logical things to do for that specific symptom. And they tend to be very initiative-oriented approaches that we use to go after these specific symptoms. And, they can be effective in the short term, but rarely do they ever lead to a sustained performance improvement. So what's the solution? From my perspective and experience, and as Tanya mentioned in my introduction, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've had the good fortune to work in many industries, and there's some common threads that I've pulled from those industries that I'll share with you today. So we've developed a proactive approach on the how. How do you look at your health of your supply chain? If you have a proactive approach, it enables a measured response and addresses the entire supply network, okay? So the way you do that is you evaluate the entire supply chain, you create a very clear future state, and you understand the value of redesigning, okay? So let's start with beginning to look at the supply chain. Let's use metrics. So you use metrics to understand symptoms. So my point about symptoms is that symptoms are not to be ignored. So just like if we have continuous fever, that's going to tell us that we have something wrong in our body. So we're going to go to the doctor and take a look at it. The doctor might do other diagnostics to help us understand what else might be going on, right? They might draw blood and so on and so forth. But they don't necessarily just give us medicine for the fever and send us home. Sometimes they would, but as we age, that's not going to happen because we become more complex, evolving individuals as we age. So in the same way, look at the delivery performance, look at the delivery quality performance, look at the inventory and so on. Those are all symptoms. And then understand what is causing those symptoms. So implement a root cause analysis if you don't have one. if you have one, really exercise that root cause analysis methodology and get to the fifth why. For those of us who've been in the Lean Six Sigma world for some time, understand what fifth why is. So what that means is keep asking why until you get to the real reason why something is going wrong. And I guarantee you, by the time you get to fifth why, you are going to have a very thorough understanding of why the symptom was arising to start with. So for example, let's take an example. You might have where a customer delivery is dropping. Why is a customer delivery dropping? Well, we have constraints. Why do we have constraints? Well, we have a certain supplier that's not delivering. Okay, let's go find out why the supplier is not delivering. Well, they don't have materials. Why don't they have materials? Because they don't have the supplier that replenishes that material isn't able to make enough. Why can't they make enough? Well, you might find that the component that you designed into your designs is either not the right component, or is difficult to source, or there's a flaw in that design to begin with. So there's a lot of rework that's taking place at the tier 2 supplier. So that's an example of saying, I'm not meeting my customer delivery, getting all the way down to what's the true reason why you're not meeting it. And so addressing that component and addressing that tier 2 supplier is addressing the root cause. Okay. Now, the third point here on this one is make sure that you are able to differentiate between special cause issues versus systemic breakdowns. Often, often many companies will say, well, I think this particular issue needs to be solved. So for example, in that first example, we might think, okay, well, that's a special cause issue. It might very well be, but you may say, all right, I see this issue in this product, but let's see if there are other similar issues so that we can understand if we have a systemic breakdown in our design process, if we have a systemic breakdown in our component evaluation process, if we have a systemic breakdown in our supplier evaluation process. So that would be something that we would want to look at from a proactive approach when you're looking at supply chain health. The second piece is create a future state roadmap. And this is where data can be your best friend. So use data to model the impact of external changes on your customers, on your factories, your distribution centers, and your suppliers. And then use scenarios to get leadership buy-in. If this happens, what is the impact on certain aspect of my supply chain? What's the impact on my logistics partner? What's the impact on my customers? What's the impact on my manufacturing? Where at some point would I have to actually move away from certain partners or move away from certain design methodologies? Those are all scenarios that you would use to get buy-in from leadership. And then the final piece of a proactive approach is understand the value of redesign, okay? You can't redesign everything at once, and it doesn't make sense, and it won't give you the value that you need to have. So segment the areas to be addressed based on the cost benefit analysis. You might address your sourcing processes and a certain product family at once because there's close association with them. You might address your core, non-core capabilities from a manufacturing perspective and understand and carry on with the right logistics partners. You're going to find these specific areas that you need to redesign and pick the winners with strategic value. Because if you can get momentum within the organization for redesign, it's going to make the whole process better, and it's going to create a culture of redesign. So why is it important to have a culture of redesign? Because redesigning your supply chain and understanding the health of your supply chain is not a one-time event. It's something that ought to be part of your operating system as an organization. It's not something you do on a weekly basis. It's not something you do on a monthly basis. Certainly look at it at least once or twice a year and have ongoing work associated with that, because it's, like I said, it's a living organism and you may have to make course corrections along the way, okay? So let's take this, a little bit in a little bit more depth. So we've got in the evaluate stage, you're looking at geopolitical changes, you're looking at economic policies, you're looking at impacted customers. So I'm going to go through some examples of things you might look at in the current times, right? So you've got a global effect of supply chain stability post-COVID, and it's going to vary by where you are in the world, your geography, as well as the level of government response based on that geography. So for example, we've had a certain type of response. In Europe, there's a different type of response. Within Europe, each country has taken a different type of a response. And same in Asia and et cetera. So for example, the French government had significant stimulus packages for its industries that forced a reevaluation of supply chains that relied more heavily on local industrial base, okay? Smaller suppliers that are under most stress with many specialty suppliers as niche market are contracting. So for example, the French and German engineering services providers are under the most pressure in that particular geographic area. Industry that rely on heavy government influences will fare better in the short term, but there's a very interesting trend that we're starting to see amongst some aerospace and defense players, and Rolls-Royce being one example. They're shifting their critical suppliers away from commercial markets into the defense markets to keep the supplier base stable until the commercial market recovers. That's a very smart move, because that shows that you're not just looking out for within your four walls, but you're also reaching out to your actual supply chain, your extended supply chain, reaching out to your tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. And so that you're protecting that supply source of supply for yourself as the market comes back. From a geopolitical perspective, we've got, growing desire to move manufacturing centers out of China, and that's going to have a big effect on the supply chain structure, and the center of low-cost support will change. So, as we've seen, China has drifted from being a low-cost region to not the lowest cost, and there's other, elements of cost that we won't talk about right now with respect to that region. However, as we think about reshoring, what does that mean? We should be thinking about it from the perspective of impact of isolationist economic policies in the Western nations. What does that mean for us? What is the sentiment for cross-border economic agreements? And how is that going to play out? So really laying out an end-to-end approach, starting with where our customers are today, where are they likely to be as we grow and as the market recovers? What does that mean for our footprint of our factories? What does that mean for our supplier footprint? And really having a full view of that is very, very critical. From a supply chain optimization perspective, it's becoming more difficult as economic and regulatory and market opportunities, are in a state of flux. But I think all of that will get sorted out, and it'll get sorted out fairly quickly. We've got we've got an aerospace tier 1 that's been cited, in our work that is dealing with issues with post-COVID stability of the supply chain with availability of components and services. So the near-term effect may be to move away from, just-in-time inventory. So they're actually saying, let's take a look at when the market comes back, where is it going to come back, in what sector, and therefore what inventory do I really need to start to place buffers in. Inventory is not a bad thing. Too much of the wrong inventory is a bad thing. But having a very well thought out strategy and starting to lay that in place now while the market is still in a state of flux is really important, because when it comes back, you're going to be in a better situation. Again, because you evaluated the health of your supply chain, you evaluated the changes that might take place, and you took measured actions. That's being proactive with respect to your supply chain, okay? So as I mentioned earlier, data is very important when you're looking at the health of your supply chain. Often, we kind of get stuck in this mode of approaching it from anecdotally. We it's like, well, we've got folks who've been doing this 20, 30 years. They know what's likely to happen. They know what works, what doesn't work. And that's true. However, as we said before, data can be very, very important in the supply chain, because it actually tells us what can happen and what approaches we can take that may not be intuitive to us. So looking at your customers, your markets, your products, measure the current and expected demand volatility. Don't accept no for an answer, or don't accept I don't know for an answer. Nobody knows for sure. But leverage the salespeople, leverage the market executives, leverage your customers to have a dialogue that says, what could happen and what should we do if this happens, right? Because we're all in this together. Analyzing the shifting revenue and gross profit points. Because as the market shifts, your revenue points will shift, your gross profit points will shift. In some cases, you will have lower profits than you thought. In other cases, the market will create opportunities for higher profits. And if you're not looking at it, if you're not evaluating it with data, you could miss that opportunity. Look for industry shifts as a result of external factors. We're starting to see a lot of EMS players shifting from aerospace and defense to medical devices, and vice versa. A lot of semiconductor, players are seeing shifts as well. So think about where you are in that supply chain and where there are shifts that are taking place across the customer base and how that impacts your portfolio and your markets and your products. Okay. Manufacturing, distribution, and logistics partners obviously also need to be evaluated and put together from a supply chain design perspective. There is substantial opportunity for consolidation in almost any industry that we have right now. So look at integration, look at consolidation, look at outsourcing of non-core processes as an opportunity for your supply chain design, okay? Think about design considerations. Who has your IP today? Who's your design partner? Should they be the design partners moving into the future? What is their health? What is their, where do they have issues in their supply chain that will impact you eventually? Address capacity issues via reservations. I'm a big fan of this because, often when market is going well, we are telling our suppliers to keep up with us. And they might get, a little extra business. But when the market is going down, we turn the spigot off with our suppliers. And as a result, our suppliers, the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, especially the smaller suppliers, the mom and pops of the shops, tend to suffer horrifically when these things happen. So think about how you can reserve capacity with some of your key suppliers, how you can help out some of the smaller suppliers that rely on your business, and what is it that they need to have in place to ensure that they're going to be ready as the market shifts. So that's really important. I really encourage my clients to think beyond their own four walls, because we rely heavily on our partners when the market, when we're doing well, and we also rely heavily on our partners when the market's not doing well. So it's our responsibility to ensure that we understand what their needs are. That's not to say that we're going to subsidize on an ongoing basis, but it is our responsibility to understand how to keep the entire supply chain healthy. Simply beating up on the suppliers is no longer an answer, and that was never the answer, but for too long companies have done it. So go reach beyond your four walls. Then you have the situation of poor performing and growth suppliers, right? So you got to address these chronic suppliers with systemic solutions. And I will tell you that that's not going to change on its own. That's going to require some heavy, I would say, what's the word I'm looking for? Intervention from you, where you have some chronic suppliers that need to deal with their systemic issues. Then you've got growth suppliers. So one of the biggest flaws that we see is that when we're putting together we're looking at our supply chain health, we tend to look at suppliers who are chronic suppliers. We don't tend to look at suppliers that are on our growth plan. So pull in those growth plans and really look at suppliers and say, what is their health? The ones that we think they're okay today, but as my volume grows, as I have changes from my customers, as I want to be more responsive and agile to my customer, can this supplier stick with me? Can they actually deliver based on those expectations? And then the final thought is build strategic pods. I like to build pods because you want to create a community of suppliers. When I was working in industry, I was a really big fan of creating supplier communities. And so having supplier councils where I brought in suppliers that were not necessarily competitors of each other, but sometimes they were competitors of each other, but many cases they were a combination of small, big, medium-sized suppliers. And in those suppliers, we talked about what could we do to improve the entire supply chain. And we got the voice of the supplier coming in and helping us understand where do we need to improve our processes, where do we need to improve our designs, where we do need to improve our systems, and so on and so forth, so that collectively we had a better supply chain. And that has worked very well in my experience because it allows you to create a community then that sticks together as the market shifts. So those pods can be very important asset in your supply chain. So as I mentioned before, don't be afraid of data. Our supply chain has a personality, from end units, from products we build, from how those products are forecasted, how those products are purchased, how we sell those products, the different margins we make on those products, the type of inventory we carry on those products, as well as how we treat the customers and how we bundle those products as well. So all of those characteristics define the personality of our supply chain. So create an integrated view of the enterprise with data. Okay. So for example, look at it from a value stream perspective, end to end. Look at it from how that product is sold to how that product is made, how that product is sourced, and how that product goes out to the marketplace and delivered. Outline the cost containment opportunities in the short term. Overlay future scenarios, whether that product is going to survive or not. It's going to be cannibalized. It's going to be a growth opportunity for us. We're going to be introducing it into a new market, so on and so forth. Then compare the impact points of today and impact points of the future. And that will give you a very clear design for that value stream that you need to have in place. So let's talk a little bit about key redesign actions, okay? So when you think about the redesign of your supply chain, you want to look at it from a product perspective, manufacturing, and sourcing strategy. And obviously there are other elements, but I picked those main three. Firms are understanding a portfolio review to determine the capabilities to maintain and to exit and to acquire and invest in. So they're looking at it and saying, what products should I stay in, keep? Where can I increase price? Where can I get better penetration? Where do I need to just get out of because I'm no longer making money on these products? And no matter what I try, I can't seem to get traction in that marketplace. So it's better to just divest that in that particular marketplace. Cost cutting and optimization of operations are still leading in terms of the importance of the direction of supply chain, because the bottom line is still king. So you have to understand, how does your product portfolio contribute to the bottom line? When we have lots of volatility in our demand signal, we're contributing to erosion of the bottom line. Not that they can't, it has to be that way, but unmanaged, that's how it becomes, that's the impact we have. When we are not communicating the desires of the customer in an effective way, we are impacting the designs of those supply chain, therefore we are impacting the bottom line. So thinking about how that product portfolio is managed and how that needs to be managed in the future is important. Think about the reevaluation of OEMs and then how they, many OEMs are today embedding their savings in long-term contracts, but the suppliers need to be able to balance their revenue flow with their long-term profit margins. So that really requires a relook, so you really can't have this one directional approach from a sourcing perspective. You really need to be thinking about these partnership agreements that actually improve bottom line for both organizations, both the OEMs and the suppliers and the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. Balancing the global footprint is very difficult. Consolidating supply to low-cost regions where possible will be an attractive near-term opportunity and action. However, one of the things that you want to look at is don't just focus on the near term, because the near term will only allow you to make, multiple jumps. And you don't want to make multiple jumps, because every time you consolidate, there's costs associated with it. There's impact on your customer service that's associated with it. There's impact on your working capital that's associated with it. So you really need to rethink and say, how do I look across and so that I can minimize multiple stops in my consolidation? Technologies like additive manufacturing and move to Industry 4.0 will may localize supply chains more significantly. So think about in your consolidation strategy, how you're using the different technologies from a manufacturing perspective, and how is that going to contribute or not contribute to your consolidation effort. So it's not just about getting out of a certain geography, it's also looking at how am I manufacturing in the future? What does my distribution footprint look like? What does my total cost look like? So emphasis on testing the supply chain with respect to delivery performance, looking at solvency issues, the geographic location will be important from a sourcing perspective, renegotiating contracts to control costs, but then also the behaviors of your supply chain downstream. Suppliers are willing to negotiate relationships, but they seek a quid pro quo. So you really need to be thinking about that. So an example would be a rail service that who is splitting work 50-50 with a competitor to ask them to come down on price, and so that they can have, they're asked for 100% of the business, which they were given. So again, think outside the box. How can you really leverage your partners in your customers and your competitors and your partner side of the house and to improve your sourcing relationships? So the final step in this is next step rather, is to look at laying out that roadmap. So address the roadmap with key activities, what you sell, to meaning your products and services, what you make, where you know, in terms of your core and non-core processes that you, from a manufacturing perspective, where you make them, looking at the geographic location of your manufacturing and what you should outsource, what you're buying and what you should be buying, and who are you buying it from. So make sure that you have key activities of all of those elements in your supply chain health assessment, and then your supply chain redesign as well. Draw out the end-to-end manufacturing and logistics roadmap by market and by product, because it will vary. Keep in mind the end-to-end lead times and total cost. Too often we get fixated on cost and we lose sight of lead time, or we get fixated on lead time and we lose sight of the total cost. Ensure the appropriate KPIs are used and identified in the roadmap. And then make sure that you're articulating process and technology and organization gaps that must be part of the future state. It is very, very important that you help the organization understand, hey, this is what I have today. These are the processes that are gaps. These are the technologies that are gaps. These are the organizational gaps I have, whether it's missing talent, whether it's missing a certain tier of leadership, whether it's upgrading talent. All of those need to be very well evaluated before you say, I have a supply chain roadmap for the future, okay? So the point here is make sure that you're not going in with half a plan. So the plan must have people, process, technology, and capability in it, okay? Create a focused team to lead the change. Do not leave it up to the people that are doing the day-to-day tactical work today. What I'll often tell clients is start with a transformative approach and move to a continuous improvement approach. So the transformative approach is have a dedicated team that is going to take action on this from the onset. And then as those changes, make the big changes, and as those changes become more organic, then you've created the culture of change, and you can put that back into the organization. And then it's no longer an extra effort that's being taken by the client. It's by the dedicated team. It can actually become part of each organization head's continuous improvement map, but it takes time to get there. So my final thought to you would be, look at it from the perspective of, I need to start with looking at my health of my supply chain, okay? I need to look at it from the lens of my customers, of my competitors, of my market, my suppliers, and my internal resources, whether it's manufacturing, marketing, and so on. Look at that, look at that health, look at that diagnostic and that assessment, understand where do you have immediate opportunities to improve? Where do you have opportunities that if you close those gaps, you will see improvement on your top line and your bottom line very quickly. Then lay out what are the longer term strategies that you need to have in place. And they might require more investment. They might require more patience of the organization. So leave those for later. So my final thoughts would be to move swiftly and don't overthink it. Too often companies say, well, this seems like a huge project. I'm not sure if I can take this on. I'm not sure my organization has the time or the resources or the budget to do this. It really does not take a huge amount of budget to create this. A lot of the knowledge is intuitive and it's in your organization, but you have to lay out the data and you have to lay out what the data is telling you and get more factual about it. Typically with our clients, we go in and we make this happen in a matter of weeks rather than months, and start to drive those actions to improve the health of our client supply chain. So with that, I will open it up to questions because that's actually my favorite part versus talking to a screen. So Tanya, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there are questions. Wrong one. Oh, that's the wrong one too. Hold on. Can't seem to work Zoom this morning. Okay, so I will open this up to any questions that might be out there.
Thank you, Seema. That was great. I really, love how you explain the program and how you break it down. If you guys have specific questions on this program that is offered through the AZMEP, but we'll engage Seema as our subject matter expert. So let us know what you heard, what your takeaways are. If you have any questions on what was just delivered, I can read them in the Q&A or even the chat. But either way, just let us know what you're thinking out there. Be great to hear from you.
I think there were a couple of questions that came in earlier, so I don't know if you have those.
I think we just
Yeah, there's just one that came up.
So Seema, I'm being asked, is this type of approach relevant to small companies?
So that's a really good question. It absolutely is. In fact, I would say that it's more relevant to small companies because resources are limited in smaller companies. So looking at your health of your supply chain is critical aspect of ensuring that you can deliver today and to ensure that you've got a growth program in place. So absolutely, it's relevant to small, medium, large companies. And it, obviously would take less time for a small company because of the bandwidth of that organization, but very relevant.
So less time compared to what? Can you kind of give us an idea of how long it would take?
Yeah, so I would say that a typical, let's say a company that's doing a revenue of 50 million, it would be, I would say this could be about a 3-week exercise. A company that's doing a revenue of 5 to 10 million, you could probably do this in 2 weeks. A company that's a billion, you might take 4 to 6 weeks to do this type of an exercise. And,
Okay.
and the reason for that is because it's not exponentially more because they have more resources, and then the scope of the exercise tends to change as well with the size of the organization.
Okay, thank you. And at the end, when you talk about that roadmap, do you implement that as well with the client or just lay it out for them to do themselves?
It depends. So some clients want our help to, really implement this and get it going, and they might take our help, might ask for our help in the sort of the initial stages and the transformative changes, and then they take over from the continuous improvement perspective. There are other clients that really want us to coach them, so not really implement for them or with them, but really be the consultants that are guiding them through. So we do that as well. And then there are other, folks who are maybe smaller in size will actually come in and be interim leaders for them. So I have a client who is, roughly about a $100 million organization, where, I'll go in and be their COO. I'll be their chief transformation officer. I'll be their chief strategy officer for, a time period to get all this put in place. And then I'll hand it back over to their leadership.
Okay, great. So based on what you're seeing now, is there a specific industry that is needing this the most?
I would say that there's not a specific, there's not an industry that doesn't need this. However, we're starting to see shift in a lot of different industry, aerospace and defense specifically. I'm starting to see a lot there. There's, medical devices and healthcare industry is going through a lot of changes as well. So we're starting to see those shifts. And then from a high tech industry, we're starting to shifts around reshoring. And so that's going to create that additional element of complexity as well. So I would say those are the top 3 industries that, need to look at this fairly quickly.
I'd love to hear from the audience if there's specific industries, for the manufacturers on the call. Can you kind of share in the Q&A or the chat what you're experiencing, what your challenges are with your supply chain right now? It'd be great if we can get some input. And it's hard for us because we can't see you. So the only way to communicate is what you enter into the chat or the quick Q&A. And it'd be great to use Seema's knowledge right now with this time that we have with her. And if you don't have specific questions now, what we are offering is just a brief call with Seema to determine if her program would be a fit for what you're experiencing. The way to do that would be to contact your client advisor. As we mentioned before, if you're not sure who it is, then reach out to the website azmep.org. we can assign you one, but we want to make sure that, you know, we're really in here helping you guys overcome what's going on in the supply chain. And another question, as we're waiting for maybe some of the manufacturers to give some input, would be, Seema, how long would this typical implementation take? And I'm sure it does depend on the size of the organization, but I guess on average, what would you say?
The implementation, you know, I would say that it does depend on the size of the organization. It also depends on where the organization is on their maturity path. So if you've got an organization that's just starting or is expanding and growing, believe it or not, it actually takes less time, because what happens is there's not sort of this old deprogramming that we have to do within the organization, right? If you've got a large organization, it becomes a little bit of a longer scenario, because it takes, you know, you have to sort of undo some of the things that might be there before. There's a lot of cultural challenges that you might have to put in place, because not just simply going out and saying, here's a supply chain map, be happy and you know, move on, right? That's not really the scenario here. What we have to say is, engage the organization, create that map, and then say, now let's go implement it. And some of your resources that are critical to implement these supply chain maps are the same people that may not have supported it in the beginning. So there's a lot of cultural shifts that you have to do. So for a larger organization, you know, it could take several months, but in the smaller organization, it's actually much easier because of the, you know, the freshness of the organization that you have.
Okay. Great. So I'm just curious, you mentioned how to reshore, and is there information you can give, or a webinar you can present on that topic?
Yes, we actually have, I think our 5th webinar is on reshoring.
Oh, okay.
And how to think through reshoring, how to, you know, what are some of the strategies that we ought to be using when we're thinking about reshoring. And you know, again, one of the things that I'd like to just, you know, say that I work with clients, you know, around the world, and, you know, Arizona is an opportunity that many folks may not be aware of, but, you know, it's part of our mission to go out there and introduce Arizona as an opportunity for reshoring, because of the, you know, we have great talent, we've got great weather, and we've got, you know, lots of land and opportunity to expand and grow. So, you know, that's something that that's very near and dear to my heart as well.
And great support.
Yes, and great support. Yes, for sure.
As part of Arizona Commerce Authority, the MEP is able to help with attracting new businesses to the state. And, you know, when they are new to the state, or even currently here, we want them to know about the MEP program, so we can help give them the support, offer incentives, credits, things that we're able to do for them in order to keep their business sustainable.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think what we're going to find with reshoring is that there's an opportunity for us to create those pods that I mentioned before, right? Those supplier pods in region. And that makes, I'll tell you, that makes rapid design a lot easier. That makes using, you know, some of the technologies that I talked about earlier very easier. And it allows an organization to really gel. But when we have manufacturing, you know, on the other side of the world, we might think it's lower cost, but in fact, in a total cost equation, it's not always a lower cost opportunity. I did in a project 2 years that just ended a year ago. I did 6 consolidations in 2 years. So 6 companies, 6 factories that I consolidated, and one was actually one was in China. And have them reshore and bring them here. You know, it can be a very complex task. So one of the things that I always tell companies is that, you know, be aware of what you're getting into before you sign the line in any geographic location.
Great information, Seema. I'm not seeing any other questions from the audience, but this will be recorded, and I believe will be on YouTube. So we're going to get the information out if people weren't able to finish or attend the whole thing today. But we want to thank everybody for their time, for joining in. We know your time's valuable, so we're going to give you back 5 more minutes of your day. Thank you, Seema. and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.